Now, how did Nigeria's State Oil Corporation rack up a debt of more than $6 billion to international oil suppliers after agreeing to swap crude with the cost of product on demand? That's one of the major questions many Nigerians are asking following the decision of the federal government to increase the price of petrol again. The current scarcity has been on for more than 2 months, but the past 72 hours could be described as a basket case, with millions of citizens desperately keeping up with lengthy queues at filling stations. Well, Arise analyst Frank Tietie joins us now for a quick conversation. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us here on Newsday.
Good afternoon, and my pleasure.
Now, what do you make of how this situation has played out so far, with that question that's on most Nigerians' minds?
Well, I think there's a lot of misconceptions because of paucity of information and lack of understanding of how the dynamics of the sector. First, we have a government that was quite pointed in declaring that an end to subsidies, which triggered a whole lot of activities, a lot of uncertainties with regards to petroleum pricing, and untold hardship. Thereafter, we have seen a national oil company, which is not supposed to be a state-owned company, by the way, by giving the provisions of the Petroleum Industry Act, that has been quite spirited in its moves to resolving the crisis. It has received quite a lot of bashing from Nigerians, again, because of the fact that much of the responsibilities are placed on it, rather than identifying what I consider as the main agency of government that is supposed to be responsible to Nigerians and for the situation that is quite uncertain. And I'm referring to the Nigerian Midstream and Downstream Petroleum Regulatory Authority. It's responsible for ensuring that there is a certain pricing framework for petroleum products across the country. It's also responsible for ensuring that at all times in Nigeria, it monitors the storage stocks to ensure that there is no time of crisis as we expect. But we also realize the provisions of the Petroleum Industry Act that places a responsibility on the Nigerian National Petroleum Company Limited to ensure that it is the supplier of last resort, thereby ensuring at all material times in this country energy security. So it is taking much of the responsibility and blame at this time, whereas the uncertainty actually lies in the fact that government has not been quite forthright and saying things the way they ought to be. In the introduction, you mentioned the issue of crude oil swap, which was expected to, that is for the exchange of crude oil. Refineries abroad were supposed to supply PMS at all time. We had that stability for some time, especially after the immediate removal of this subsidy. Nevertheless, we also realized that the NNPCL, categorically stated that it had ended that crude oil swap deal. Even though there were controversies as at October in 2023, that it also did pay, did allow some measure of exchange of crude oil for PMS. But the NNPCL still maintains that it has ended that. And at every time it has imported PMS into this country, it paid cash. So the situation is quite uncertain in the sense that we have reports coming from the NNPCL that the actual cost of importing petrol it's far and above 1,100. And because of its responsibilities under the Petroleum Industry Act to ensure energy security, it has attempted to be politically correct, probably to save the president from any form of embarrassment by ensuring that there is a measure of price stability. We don't need all those kind of political interventions in this pricing process. What the NMDPRA should do is simply to exercise its powers and fix the petroleum pricing in such a manner that it takes into consideration the various vagaries of the industry, and it will also include the need for both supply, demand, and the need for profit. The NNPCL is supposed to be a commercial company. According to Section 53 of the Petroleum Industry Act, it's supposed to operate basically under the provisions of the laws of the Company and Allied Matters Act and the Petroleum Industry Act. But we see it often being subjected to too much political interference, and now it is biting more than it can chew, taking responsibility for what it shouldn't. Whereas the NMDPRA, which is directly responsible here with regards to ensuring that petroleum products get to Nigerians in a seamless manner, is quiet. I think that the NMDPRA should step up its act.
All right, Frank, I've listened to what you said, but if you were to speak to people that are on the long queues around Lagos and Nigeria, is the fact that they would expect that since there is an uptick in the price of PMS, there should be availability of this. So how do we try to rationalize all that is happening in Nigeria? Because on one hand, there were talks about the fact that because probably they were selling at a far lower price, that is the reason why there were scarcity. But right now, most Nigerians do not really understand what is going on, because the government is saying one thing, the body language is saying another thing, and the reality on the ground is completely different.
Oh, first of all, I think the government is not saying enough. There's a whole lot more that is involved that is yet to be told. And I know for political reasons they're not saying that. They are afraid of the volatility of the situation. However, we're experiencing a collective failure that has arisen as a result of the resource costs that we've dealt with, which made imports cheaper than production in our country. That's the reason why our refineries refused to work for a long time, not necessarily as a result of corruption, even though corruption accounted quite a lot for it, because it turned out to be beneficial to a cabal, a very opaque and atrocious cabal that wanted the subsidy to go on and wanted importation to continue. However, we were left without any option but to keep on importing. Now, why do I say the government is not saying enough? The reason is this: when you go to the black markets here in Abuja, you find that the PMS is readily available in the streets, selling for how much? A jerry can of PMS now sells for 20,000 naira, when it ought to, in such an embarrassing and very unfortunate manner in that terms. Why do we continue to have constant supply in the black market? Because we don't have correct pricing. So even with this current pricing that we have, that is currently bringing Nigerians to their knees, that is hugely considered as a national embarrassment, the fact, which is a painful truth, which the government is hiding, is that we still do not have the correct pricing, because and all of these have been as a result of the volatility of the naira as against the US dollar. These have all created a serious problem of price differential. Nevertheless, we see a struggling Nigerian National Petroleum Company Limited that is trying to give a different picture from what the reality is, in the sense that it is importing PMS at a higher rate than it is attempting to sell. Now, going against the principles of business by which it is supposed to run, according to Section 53 of the Petroleum Industry Act. And according to Bayo Onanuga, which to a large extent I agree with him for once, the NNPCL will no doubt go very broke, and Nigeria will experience a very serious financial crisis if it continues to carry on a covert subsidy, whereas as a matter of semantics, the government has washed its hands out of subsidy, but the NNPCL couldn't just imagine that the provision of the PIA that says that it must, as at all times, provide energy security, or in the alternative, provide other forms of fuel, like it is trying to do with the compressed natural gas, and branching off into other forms of alternative energy sources. However, it is struggling seriously, so it appears to have been doing magic all this while, that it has been providing fuel, whereas it is importing for above 1,000 naira. So that is the major reason why other marketers couldn't in any way import. Nevertheless, we have been having this sing-song about the emergence of Dangote refinery, which now creates the real big problem. We're talking about what is the proper pricing now that the president, at president out of the law, and I think illegally in his intervention by saying that crude be supplied to the Dangote refineries to be paid in naira and expectedly to be supplied also in naira. So all of this expectation of immediate resolution will just be fleeting because Dangote refinery may not just even be able to sell, below 1,000 naira in the real terms of applying market forces and cost implications.
Well said, Frank. Now, when it comes to the argument that the government has made that the fuel price increase is necessary to address NNPCL's debt, how do you reconcile that with the constitutional obligation to ensure the welfare of citizens?
Okay, so let's hope that our country works well, and we should run government according to the books. There are responsibilities. The Minister of Petroleum has a responsibility. The various agencies created by the Petroleum Industry Act all have responsibilities in this regard. And the NNPCL, which is supposed to be a commercial company, is supposed to have a responsibility. Now, I find it very uncomfortable where the government is taking responsibility for fixing prices. When I say government in this case, I'm talking about the direct intervention of the president. I cannot emphasize this enough, that the pricing framework at every material time, it doesn't have to be one time for all. At every time with regards to the various adjustments, the various fluctuations, the NMDPRA must give the proper pricing that will encourage competition, that will encourage major marketing companies to provide this product. But we see that the NMDPRA is not providing that enabling framework to encourage this intervention by other companies, by other marketing companies, by other agencies, other than the NNPCL. So in that case, the government is taking, I think that this political approach being adopted by the President Tinubu's government is not going to work, and it's not helping it by taking responsibility for fixing oil prices.
But Frank, permit me to interject at this point. Frank, the reason why I ask is, isn't that contravening the PIA that the government are the ones fixing prices?
Yes, directly contravening the PIA. That's why the call is that allow the government to be run, allow processes to operate according to the books, allow NNPCL to operate as a company that is registered under the Company and Allied Matters Act, that is regulated by law, that operates for profit and declares its profit and then keeps 20% of it for onward investment in its work to provide alternative energy sources. Now the idea is this: the government ideally should be quiet about it and should actually run to NNPCL or other major oil and the PMS importers for rescue and begging them to provide solutions, and not trying to create a situation that it is washing its hands off its control, it's allowing the market forces to determine prices, and at the same time taking responsibility for fixing oil prices. Government shouldn't do that. However, you can now say that the NNDPRA, being an agency of government, is actually shying away from its responsibilities. It should directly engage Dangote refineries, for example, because Dangote refineries, to a large extent, the NNPCL are all licensees of the NNDPRA. It has the responsibility, it has the powers, it has a function, statutory function to regulate them. So at this time, Nigerians shouldn't have any form of uncertainty with regards to importation of PMS and the proper pricing. But it appears that these agencies are, susceptible to political control. They are more or less afraid first to keep their jobs. I'm talking specifically with the managers of the NFDPRA, by not being forthright. If not, we shouldn't be hearing statements from people like Bayo Nanuga, or expecting the president or the Federal Executive Council to make a pronouncement with regards to how oil and gas business is run, when we have a law that specifically, makes provision to the minutest detail on how issues like, that affect, distribution of petroleum products are supposed to be organized in this country under the regulation and watch of the NNDPRA.
All right, I want to say many thanks to you, Frank Tietie, for your time here on Newsday.